Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the 22 Panels podcast. Today, Emily Mehr, Ejoy Mehr Comics, or Ejoy Comics, is
Uh, yeah,
sitting in.
Ejoy Mehr is my pen name, but you can call
Right,
me
right,
Emily. Doesn't
right.
matter.
Well, I'm trying to guide them towards your stuff.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm giving you the quick plug, Emily. You've got a Patreon, you've got an Instagram. They'll find it.
Yes, yes, yes.
She's
Okay.
like,
I
I'm so in host mode that I didn't even think that I might plug stuff. He's
promotions,
he's
You know.
he's sitting in Tyler's chair, at least for now. And I have the independent cartoonist Josh Bear with us today. And
Hi.
please tell me I pronounced that right. I normally ask that
Yeah.
question ahead of time.
Y-
You'd be like the first person ever that it was Bayer, and I went, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did a podcast recently where they announced me as buyer. Uh,
Bayer.
Bayer and Bear, I don't really hear the difference.
No, you have to work really hard.
Yeah.
So, Josh, tell us about your new book because I thank you for sending it to me. Unended, coming soon from Uncivilized Books. Fantastic, fantastic small publisher. You can pre-order from Josh's website, joshbear.com or joshbear.storenvy.com. Um, yeah, Unended was a really cool book, and I think I want to hear you talk about it before I talk about it because I don't want to sell it short.
Oh, sure. Unended is it's I call my work biographical fiction. My major graphic novels have been have been like thinly veiled versions of like my own story, mixed with fiction. I tend to believe that it's always fiction as soon as you're telling a version of
Right.
your own story. There's things that you're biased, there's stylizations, there's all these things that make it really different. So something than objective truth. So I'm telling a really personal story that is about how I found about my relationship with art, my relationship with my dad, and my upbringing, and artist's relationship with unfulfilled potential. My dad had a play that he wrote that like we hadn't known that he was a writer. We know they had talked about being a writer from time to time, but I didn't know that he actually was taking a stab at it. And he was secretly had like a drawer full of like unfinished manuscripts. The play is probably the most finished thing that he did. And it has me in it, has my brothers in it, has my mother who died when I was young in it, and talks about her death. And then it goes all the way to the future and talks about kind of a fictional him kind of pre-envisioning his own funeral and his own death. So but it's not really finished, so that's why the book is called Unended. So I start when he passed away in 2010. I wasn't really ready to tackle it, but I'd wanted to do it as a graphic novel ever since I first glimpsed it. And after, hopefully every project makes you a little bit more secure in like what in your skill in your craft. So I saw that I could do a pretty long book with my last one, Tomorrow Forever. And this one if you've read Tomorrow Forever, this one feels a lot like it. It's got the same color scheme, the same kind of panel, like the same. It just feels like it was almost another chapter in that book. And in many ways, it is my earliest, my earliest book in this vein of doing biographical fiction was Theft that I did in, I don't know, 2011 or something for Retrofit Press. And Theft was always like a thinly veiled version of me. And then Tomorrow Forever, it was still like a Seth in his 20s, which is a really dark area of my life. And I drew a lot from my own experience in my early 20s, just not being able to become functional for a long time. And so if people are interested in what became of that character, my dad died when I was in my very early 40s. And I'm 53 now. So it's very much like what I never really thought I'd have another late middle-aged story about theft, but this really does feel like it's that character. And so there's a real continuum, and I think there'll be a continuum into my next book as well, which I can talk about later. So I worked on it for about 4 years, and I create the play as a comics narrative, but then a lot of it is what's going on around the play and my relationship with the page, my relationship with my dad's skewed view of reality as I see it, that's communicated through my dad's play. There's a lot to unpack there, both as a son and just somebody who's looking at it as a piece of work. But of course, it's very weighted for me. I'm the son, and this is his legacy. So as far as the written word goes, this is his legacy, and then I guess I'm also his legacy. And back there, and there's a lot of through lines between his life and my life in a very major way. So I adapted it, but a lot of it is really me trying to cope with my memories of my dad, and also just how I have responsibility for finishing this play now, which is impossible to finish, and that's why it's called Unended.
Right. No, I like one of the things that stood out to me, and partially it's because it reminded me of a couple other comics I've read recently, and something that I don't quite want to call it unique to comics, but I haven't seen in a lot of other places. Where on one level, it's a story about your dad and the screenplay, but you also have the story about yourself discovering this information, this history, this perspective that you hadn't seen before. And the telling of history on two levels, both the history itself and the discovery of that history.
Right.
So couple times recently in European biographical comics. I don't know if either of you read the new Gil Scott Heron biography, and earlier this year there was a book called Miss Davis about Angela Davis, and both of them wound up being, I mean, they're very much biographies of their subjects, but they're also the stories of the writers, at least, learning about their subjects. You know, the experience. And for that matter, one of my favorite books of last year was a book called, I think it was make certain I get the title of this one right, because there we go. Yeah, there was a book last year. It was just fascinating, called, by Rebecca Hall with illustrations by Hugo Martinez, called Wake: The Hidden History of Women-Led Slave Revolts. And the history of the slave revolts is fascinating and whatnot, but what's really fascinating is that it's a memoir of her diving into and learning about those slave revolts and how hard it is to sift through the information and the places that she had to go. And I know that that's a lot of what I appreciated with Unended is, you know, your dad's story was interesting and you portrayed it fantastically. But what really got me was when you were stepping away from it and talking to friends or family members or whatever about how you were grappling with it. And I just don't, it's the type of thing that reminds me why I love comics. I don't know how you could do that well in another medium, where you could go from I'm telling this story to I'm being meta about why I'm telling this story or how I'm telling this story, and have it be cool rather than get over yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made any sense, but that's what went through my head.
I mean, I think it could be done with film, but it would be done differently. But I mean, the medium is just different. It feels like essentially in all the important ways, it maybe could be done with film. It just feels like if you were just sliding back and forth between Well, no, I've seen that. I've seen that in film where
I think
they
I've
jump
seen it in
back.
documentaries some. I've seen it a little less in things that aren't documentary, because it's one thing to do it when you've got like the interviews and then the archival footage.
Hmm.
I don't know how. I mean, I'm not saying that it couldn't be done, but I
Hmm.
think it would be a bigger test to try to do it in anything resembling even biographical fiction. Uh,
Um, well, thanks. I mean, when doing the book, I like if like what the way that I interpreted the scenes seems signature, then I take that as a compliment. There's definitely moments in the book where I was like, how am I going to make this interesting and how am I going to make this clear? There's a couple things in the comic that probably, depending on who you are, you might not find clear. And I accept that. But yeah, I was gonna say it's like I
See,
imagine.
I think that's a feature, not a bug for this story. I think
Uh-huh. How
that's
do
a
you
feature,
mean?
not a bug,
Hmm.
because uh, you're dealing with so many complicated emotions. The idea that you would even be clear on them is ridiculous. So for us to be clear on them, I mean, there were times where I didn't know how to read the page,
Hmm.
and I actually became okay with that really quickly.
Hmm. Cool.
There were a couple pages that I feel like I read out of order, and I was okay that I read it out of order. And I went back and I read it. And I'm like, okay, he probably meant it this way, but reading it this way gives me that sense of confusion that he's portraying here. Comics, another great thing about comics is that the reader is a co-collaborator and has to be.
Hmm.
Um, but where I was going is with this at times very detailed and very dense and very non-traditionally structured panel wise. Um, how much time do you spend planning out what you're going to do page by page, arc by arc, the entire book? Or are you kind of going, are you flowing on your own? I mean, how talk to me some about the process.
A little bit column A, a little bit of column B. I blocked out the major thrust of the story, and stuck to that structure after I conceived it. So I knew that I knew what the first act was going to be, what the middle act was going to be, and what the third act was going to be, and but those edges slop over each other a bit. And I also, a long time ago, I embraced the idea that when you're doing a graphic novel, you can expand and expand and expand. But in graphic novels, yeah, I kind of embraced the idea a long time ago that you don't need to have this artificial construct superimposed over you, where, for example, it's like a daily newspaper script where you have to tell the story in 4-page
Right.
increments that then are also fit in with a 6-day format.
Right.
And there's a lot of there's a lot of virtue in having those confines imposed upon you. Alan Moore said that coming up on 2000 AD was really good for him, kind of mastering a lot of story skills. But in a graphic novel, you can live with it. You can expand scenes. You can have some of my most fascinating stories I read involve long scenes where people are just the camera just
Yeah.
tracks somebody walking to their car through an open field, and that's just as important as the stuff where there's a lot of conflict
Right.
or things that are at stake or loaded dialogue. So you can do that in a comic. And yeah, a long time ago, I just told myself if I'm doing a scene and I plan it as 5 pages, and then I decide that in the middle I want to have a wide shot, there's a way that I can now make that 6 pages. I
Right.
might end up polishing the edges of the end of page 3 and what was the end beginning of page 4. And that's the type of puzzle that I'm working on.
Okay.
So I planned out the comic, stuck to it, and then expanded and expanded and expanded as it went.
Okay. I like that. That's incredible uh incredible what's the I'm looking description of the internal process. Thank you.
Mhm.
Almost like there's like you have building blocks and you can kind of like well, I mean it's editing really, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can move things around and like that gives it a totally different feeling, and I don't know. That's a fun part of comics, I think.
I actually I'm gonna ask earlier a question that I generally ask closer to the end of interviews, just because and this is where I like to share like where questions are coming from. Tyler and I just read the first volume of The Killer for our regular podcast this week. And we wound up talking about some very distinct pacing that we saw in Matt's and Luke Giacomon's work that we don't see the same in the United States. It felt very, and I've read a lot more European comics than he has, so I'm willing to call it a very European style where they're willing to, spend the whole bottom of the page with him slicing an apple and thinking, taking that walk to the car or not having to be action to action to action, but giving breath to things. Manga can sometimes do the same thing. I read a baseball manga, and I realized once when I was reading it that the entire 160 pages had taken place in like 4 innings. They hadn't even played a whole game. So where I'm going with this is I'm curious as to what do you read? What has formed your comic self? Because you have a style that's unique to you. I mean, I can't think of any comics that I immediately go, oh, Josh Bear is like this. I mean, you've got a little tiny bit of Linda Barry in you, but she's way more spread out. You've got a little tiny bit of like old underground comics, the Crumb, the Justin Green, but you're a little bit more fantastic. When you said that you grew up on Marvel Comics, I immediately went, okay, I can see that. It hadn't really occurred to me when I read it, but as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. So talk to me about your comics journey. What has stood out? What has drawn you to comics? What have you read and seen through the years that's like, oh, that's a great way to tell a story. I'm going to incorporate that or remember that or whatever.
Well, it's like there's two different ways to look at it. I mean, on one hand, the harder you try to be like somebody, the more your own voice is going to twist out from under you and make itself heard. Probably there's definitely people who are in my head when I'm trying to make a page, and my dream would be like the ideal for me. Whatever story I'm telling, I wish that I could draw it like a Harold Gray comic, like a Harold who did Little Orphan Annie. And it doesn't. It comes off though because I can't be him. I'm not. There's a lot I don't have in common with him. It comes out. I'll pull in other influences. I think about Pettibone a lot. I think about Milton Caniff and Bill Malden, who are also big influences on my line. I think about movies a lot. I think about Yoshiro Tatsumi. I love all of his stories. I haven't found any manga that really hits me the same way, except for his.
What did he do?
He did Push Cartman, Goodbye and Other Stories, Drawn and Quarterly, reprinted all of his stuff. And
oh, nice. I've heard of Cart Push Man or Man Push Cart.
Push Cartman.
Push Cart Man. Okay.
Yeah. I wonder what you think of them. They're very quiet. I find him to be amazing. And
I love a quiet manga. My favorite manga is this series called What Did You Eat Yesterday, about a middle-aged gay couple that eats dinner every day. And like that's it. So it's great.
I mean, it's crazy. What one of the manga that I just read And just because one of the things I've always said about manga is think of any three genres that you think are completely unrelated, and there's a manga that slams them together.
Uh-huh.
I just read it could be that, only it's Superman doing the eating. He flies to Japan every day and gets food at like Japanese fast food takeout places and explores it.
That's
Wait,
the
who is this?
Let me look up who's doing it.
Is it actually a DC comic,
It
or is it?
is. It is.
It's a DC comic where Superman flies to Japan.
Superman versus Meshi, which is Satoshi Miyagawa.
You
He
know,
makes a
I'm
quick
going.
stop over in Japan to try a new chain restaurant, whether it's a hearty bowl of curry or conveyor belt sushi. He takes Batman one day and he picks out the perfect meal for him.
I would love to read Superman taking Batman out for Japanese fast food. That would
Yep.
be really cool.
Yep.
It almost sounds, for a second, I almost thought it was, have you ever seen that? It's like a bootleg Batman comic called A Batman is Lost in the Woods.
I
No,
don't know
who
that
did
one.
that?
Let me find it. It's an amazing comic. It feels like Henry Darger doing Batman.
Oh shit, I would love that.
Yeah. Let me look it up real quick. Yeah, it's the type of book too. It's very quiet. So like when you read, I've seen this. I've seen the cover at least.
Yeah.
When you read it, it's like every time I pick it up, I end up reading. I don't read the whole thing. There are books like that I read the whole thing whenever I pick it up. Skibberby Bye Bye by Ron Rage with Johnny Ryan stuff. There's certainly books I pick up and I end up getting consumed by it, which to me is kind of the strongest comic there is.
Yeah.
But what else is like that? That I just end up, I mean to glance at, and then I read scene after scene. I'd have to give it some thought.
What was the Batman I won again?
Batman Lost in the Woods. I wonder if it'll come up. Comic. And it's a Batman, so maybe that's their way of getting around the legalities of it. Batman is lost in a woods. The greatest, it's only $4.
Oh.
And the description, I'm looking, hold on a second, my internet. Yeah, by David Anos. Oh, it's $13.
Still pretty reasonable.
Very. The greatest mystery Batman has ever faced may be the disappearance of his wife, Amity. The wooded acres surrounding their castle home offers few clues, and then it fades out.
Oh, this does look cool.
Very cool. So yeah, so I grew up definitely on Marvel comics in the Bronze Age. I got I was a little bit too old. I wasn't the audience for Image when they came along. I thought that I was pretty anti-Image comics. So I was kind of amazed at all the artists who were 10 years younger than me that grew up, they grew up taking that stuff seriously. And I kind of like the byproduct of Image more than Image itself. I discovered, I was reading old stuff when I was a little kid. My dad worked at a library at this college, and they had a tiny comic section, and I got old reprints of Buck Rogers out over and over again, and Skippy. So I read all of Jules Pfeiffer's Village Voice comics from beginning to end when I was like 12. I feel like all levels of comics, the old historical ones, the pulpy Marvel stuff from when I was a kid, all of it. And then I discovered Raw. When Art Spiegelman came out with Raw, it allowed him to get wide distribution for weirdo cartoonists for like Mark Bayer.
This is one of my prized possessions.
That's a late.
This is one of the last Raw productions.
Right.
They were putting it together as they finished up.
Narrative Corps.
Narrative
Corps.
Yeah,
I had
Chain Story, 69 artists, 3 panels apiece.
Mark Bayer's Agony, like when I was 17, that made a big influence on me. And then like all the other stuff that was available, like in 1988, Pettibone, Weirdo Comics. all of that like really set me on a certain path. But all of that is just kind of compacted together, all these resources, and I go back and forth looking at them. So, some people I look at for storytelling, there's some people I look at for art, and I look at writing a lot as well. I studied before I went back to school and got a degree in comics. I took like short fiction classes for like 9 months or something, just taking classes or writing short stories. And short story is probably my favorite medium, but I hate most short stories I read. I absolutely detest them. And when they're good, I'll just read them again and again and again.
I want to say that
Do you like Donald Barthelme? Barthelme?
I think he's been recommending to me before. What did he write?
He wrote this one, I think his most famous story is like he did this book about Snow White, but then my favorite of his is Me and Miss Mandible. Mandible like your jaw. And it's about this guy who for some reason gets assigned to go back to the 5th grade. And he writes, it's just his perspective of I don't know, there's like a quote in it that's like signs are signs and some of them are lies, and I don't know, it's just about like a lot of things, and I really like it. And he does a lot of like absurd short stories, and
I think I have.
yeah.
Did he do
Yeah.
one story where these two people, they're basically like a caveman and a cave woman in some kind of like almost like a Chuck E. Cheese or the Disney Museum of History, but they really are living in this cave with like food pellets that come out. And
Oh, weird.
It's definitely like what you're describing. It sounds like a cross between that and that show Severance. And
Crazy.
yeah, like they're middle class people who ended up in this job where they're living in this plastic fake dinosaur cave wearing loincloths, but it's not like they go home at night. And that sounds like somebody out there listening to this knows that story. That sounds like it might be him.
Maybe we don't actually have enough listeners that I want to guarantee that.
How
But
many
we should
Yeah,
encourage that.
But they would be the type to know
That's
that
true.
story.
We've got
Someone will know it.
some. I recently had to deal with DCPR, and that made me actually have to look at our listener numbers, and I'm like, oh, we only have like 30 downloads per episode. But I also know enough of the people who listen. Well, first of all, I think we only have 10 subscriptions. So 20 of those downloads may or may not be the same 20 each episode. In fact, I know that they're not, because I've talked to too many creators that, oh, I listened to your interview with this person, or I listened to the episode you did on this, blah, blah, blah. But not necessarily have done a ton. So we seem to be like the artists of comics podcasts.
That's DIY, baby.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
I mean,
but I just like to make certain when people say that one of my listeners will know that they understand that I've got a lot of comic shop owners, so I might help your sales some.
Yeah, this probably
don't want you to think that I'm the guy that's going to have you go big time.
This is probably being broadcast in a comic store right now. So there's like,
well, except that we're not live either.
Well, yeah,
they're
but
downloading it and they're broadcasting. They're playing it over the sound system, like for their customers, and people are like listening to this while they're getting their Wednesday fix of comics.
I would love to discover that a store does that, but I don't think there is.
Stores do this. Lion's Tooth Market in Milwaukee.
I mean, among other things, I think we swear too much.
Whatever you do.
For a comic book store? Nah.
I mean, there's still enough kids that go into comic book
stores.
Right,
children. Yes.
Or what will happen is like the one day you decide we never have kids coming here is when the mom comes in to pick up a birthday present and winds up leaving the terrible Yelp review about the conversation or the music or whatever. So there is reason to be careful.
Well, fuck her.
Yeah, I wanted to read Sailor Moon, but then I heard about this anal felching stuff, you know.
Yep,
So,
pretty much.
I don't know, whatever you do, you just got to block out reality to until it's where you want it to be. And these
Yeah.
things, they stay committed to it, and it snowballs or it doesn't. But you do it, we do it, and the ideal is that you see it continue to pick up bodies and pick up followers. And
Right.
it's just, I don't know. I think I've listened to
But
a
for
lot of,
me, it works because I get to talk to cool people.
yeah, I've
I
heard,
mean,
listened to a lot of,
if the like, I think we spend between 25 and $50 a month in hosting fees. But if $50 a month in hosting fees is what it costs for me to be able to talk to nearly anybody I feel like in comics, that's a fair trade.
that's
I mean,
what the community is.
yeah, I mean, Zine Fest, like, I so are we able to talk about when we record this? Like, CXC
Yeah,
is coming up.
whatever. Yeah, no, I'm gonna
CXC
be
is
there
coming
next
up like
weekend.
really
Yeah,
soon. And
be
I'm
there
in
next
crunch
weekend.
time right now, and I'm like, oh, do I have enough money to like print books to be able to sell?
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of fascinating to hear like how people make it work and how they almost don't make it work. It's just, yeah, the realities of whenever I do a festival, if you really add it up between work that I might give up I take off work to do it, then I'm selling inventory, but you got to factor in how much you probably paid for your inventory, like you're saying. Then there's the
Yep.
cost of the table, then there's the cost of a hotel and transportation. And yeah, it's gotten like, well, especially with the way that prices are getting jacked up, it feels like it's gotten less viable and less viable like over the years. I might sell more than I did 10 years ago, but the proportion of money that I bring in isn't, it's not all there. But at a certain point, it's just you're keeping the machine going. I know lots of legitimate
This is where I
artists
make my
who,
regular call to billionaires out there. Please, you don't need to go to Mars.
there's a
Support
lot
the
of
arts.
there's a lot of artists who what they do involves them making a film and then putting whatever they get from that film into the next film. So
Right.
it's kind of about laying the groundwork for, the road you're on is being built as you're going. And it's about, so making a profit, occasionally making a profit is great. I find that what I do often leads to other things that do support me. Making comics led me being a teacher. Being a teacher allows me to be secure financially and allows me to say whatever I want with my work. And I'm leading the type of life that I want to, and it all ties into itself. I do my work. I teach myself how to do the work by teaching other people, and then I make the work, and then I sell the work, and then I keep on teaching. It's a really, it's an
So
end unto itself.
I was looking at your website, and it looks like you do lots of different classes. Talk to me about how you got into teaching and the type of teaching you do, where you do it. That's I'm always fascinated.
I first got a chance to teach in 2009. Tom Hart, who was a kind of a mentor to many, many people.
Yeah, I like his work.
Yeah,
Ejoy,
he's awesome.
yeah, yeah, he's a mentor to both of us through Saw. So I was getting ready to graduate, and I kind of inquired on whether I could maybe be a TA in his class. And his exact words were like, "Well, SVA doesn't have a TA type program, but you can be my TA." And he's very punk rock like that. So he let me be his unofficial TA for a semester, and then he recommended me for a teaching job that I honestly, uh, you know, I wasn't ready for, but I figured I became ready for. It was at a place called the Educational Alliance. That was 2009. Somebody had told me, another teacher was at SVA, a watercolor teacher told me, when you start teaching, you're going to be bad your first semester, and then you're going to make up for all, you're going to overcorrect, and then you'll be bad your second semester, and then you'll start to get your bearings. And when I started teaching, I said, yeah, that's him. But I understand that things have to evolve though. But then sure enough, it was like he was a future, fortune teller. I totally what you described absolutely happened to me. So the Education Alliance was this, place that had all this history. It was like an old school New York Jewish community center on the Lower East Side that had all of these artists. I think Alice Neal taught there. I think that forgetting his name, but when I was there, one of the guys teaching there, his father was a painter who I absolutely love. So all these 1950s artists in the in the 1950s modernist movement in New York had all passed through this place, and I was really honored to be there. And that ended up leading to me getting recommended to teach at the Y, and I taught there for years, and I still kind of hanging on there by a thread. I have one class that's going, but at my peak, I was teaching like 6 classes a week with them because I've tried to pile on class after class to just make this work. And then I got recommended, actually, David Heatley recommended me. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. First, Ben Catcher asked me to teach at Parsons, which again, I have imposter syndrome just like anybody else. I was absolutely flabbergasted. And I thought, I didn't feel like I never felt like very secure that I had functional skills that have value in society. But he did, and I've been teaching at Parsons since 2015. And then David Heatley, they had invited him to teach at Rutgers, and he couldn't do it, and he recommended me instead. And that's been a dream come true too. So now, Jesus, when I went back to college, I mean, I literally had an experience where I would have people telling me again and again, like, get out of my office. Like, they didn't like the way I looked at them. I didn't mesh with the student body well. I didn't mesh with teachers well. And a lot of it was my own fault. But to go from being with somebody who felt like I'm going to be kicked out of higher education at any point to being somebody who's actually, who's actually given a lot of, entrusted with a lot of students, has been a really, really amazing outcome to my life. So that's probably been more of a dramatic twist of events than anything that's been in my comics. The story of Tomorrow Forever and Unended is kind of a slog where you just kind of push the ball forward bit by bit. And me becoming a teacher was just like an incredible, unlikely twist of fate.
I like it.
I started teaching workshops last October, and I'm definitely still in the I'm still learning so much, and I'm like, okay, well, I just have to accept that I'm not going to be very good for quite a while, and then just like not worry about it and just do the job. And I don't know, but yeah, teaching rules.
Yeah.
Even when you're bad at it, or not, or you think you're bad at it or something.
Yeah, I would argue that anybody who cares about it isn't bad at it. You might not have reached the point where you're at max efficiency in terms of reaching students. But if you care about it, there's going to be one student that you make a difference to. And if in the next class there are 2 students, and the class after that there are 3 students, then you're doing a great job.
I'd love to hear more about how you're structuring your classes, but I agree. I'm sure you're.
I mean, I for the most part don't do the class structuring. I personally am I'm a paraprofessional, so I do a lot.
My mom does that.
Yeah, I do a lot of one-on-one work. I do a lot of spot tutoring. I do a lot of classroom assistant. I'm the special ed. I'm a very large special ed department's Swiss Army knife.
Nice. I mean, I really, I even took like a one-on-one lesson with Josh. Like, I can see the benefits of like being able to teach somebody one-on-one. I think those are like really interesting. But so like right now I'm doing a series of 4. So like how I got started with doing the workshops is last year, the Twin Cities Zine Fest, which they don't really do a Zine Fest anymore, but last year they did a week of workshops in Minneapolis. And What was I
Sorry.
gonna say?
I think I remember you talking about that, or you posting about that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, it was like I was really nervous and like, but uh I did a comic on I did a workshop that was just like how to make a comic, a mental health comic, I called it, which is like when you, what I call like when I have to do something with my hands because I'm having like a mental health crisis. And like comics is really good for that because it forces you to like move at least your hand. And
Yeah.
like, I just kind of gave some like
Is
tips
that
on like,
how you
oh,
draw, Emily?
sometimes it is. And I
Okay.
also do a lot of,
I just it was interesting to see you immediately, and we're an audio podcast, so I have to explain. Emily just did a motion as if she was like holding the pencil with her whole hand, not between
okay,
her
well, I
fingers,
don't
just
do that, but I mean, you know, like, um,
and I'm like, wait a minute.
no, that would be
That's like the
impossible. I would get like
kindergartner
carpal
with the
tunnel.
crayon.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
use
I
finger
don't think it's
paints.
impossible, but it surprised me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
No,
don't know. Every day I'm learning. I've only done like 8 workshops so far, and it's like so I'm like really beginning. But like yeah, I don't even know. Just
it's
like
weird. It's weird, isn't it? Because you can go in, you can plan, but you can also over plan. You can
yeah.
you can plan and then completely kind of blow a fuse in class because you had so many potential plans and didn't commit to one. It's a weird art.
I
And
mean, they say about war plans that, they're good until the first shot is fired. I think teachers need to be similar about lesson plans. Lesson plans are perfect, and you need to be willing to change them the second the students walk into the room.
it's true. Yeah. Sometimes
Yeah, I've had a few bombs. Like well not bombs, but just like even the classes that I was like okay, like I did this one workshop that was like an online Zoom workshop and I packed too much in. I was like, I'm going to teach you how to make this kind of zine, but I'm also going to teach you how to make an 8-fold zine. And that was just too much. And also like the tactile stuff is really hard to do over Zoom, I discovered, because people are like, wait, which
yeah,
way do you fold it? What's going on?
yeah.
So like never again am I doing that. But
Good for you
the
though.
other
That sounds really focused to me, and I think that sounds like a forgivable mistake. Look, you
yeah.
work sometimes the thing you thought was going to work is it falls on its face, and sometimes it's technical. I was doing a Photoshop tutorial and I discovered that the gradient tool, which I've depended on for my whole coloring, well, you remember I taught you how to do it. That
Yeah.
that gradient tool doesn't exist in that form anymore. And I had to Google it, and I saw an angry thing on YouTube where there's a zillion
Oh,
people
the
saying,
worst.
yeah,
That's what
yeah,
happened with mine.
yeah.
They were like, "Oh, she's really talking a lot, isn't she?" Like, and your heart just like sinks, but you keep
Oh,
going. You have to keep going. The show must go on.
oh
So,
wow. Yeah, definitely. You definitely fall on your face from time to time. And no, but I meant that there was like an angry thread on YouTube about Adobe listing, here's how you use our new gradient tool. And it's like involves like smart objects, which I don't even know what they are. And people were like, dude, just let us have the option of the classic method. And I'm thinking, not to have a whole nerdy tech conversation, but kids these days love Procreate because it's intuitive. And here's Photoshop making this thing less intuitive. They took this thing, which was 2 steps, bounding box, and then a gradient, and then I'd multiply my layers, and that's it. And they made it like another 5 steps and a whole other level. Like I've been using Photoshop for 18 years and I don't understand what they're talking about. I don't know what a smart object is, and I don't know why I can't make those layers work for me.
No,
yeah.
the challenge, and this is just me speaking as somebody adjacent to techies, is the biggest challenge with stuff like that. And I agree with you. Whenever possible, they need to keep old functionality available.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest challenge is, um, particularly because you've been using it for 18 years, what's intuitive to you isn't necessarily going to be intuitive to the new user.
Mm-hmm.
But then the second thing is every once in a while, the old thing just doesn't fit into the new code.
Mm.
The way there's just not a good way to code it.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to old software, it still needs to be maintained. You still have to like make certain that it works with the new operating system, with the new whatnot. So, the question is how many resources do you put? I mean, I think in a perfect world, we'd have a lot more stuff go open source so that if people used it, they could find coders to maintain it for them, so that there could be communities around various software.
But then they wouldn't be able to charge us $52 a month or
Well, they
whatever.
charge you for the new. Well, no, I agree with you. I mean, they could still charge you for the new one,
Yeah.
but yeah, rather than making you stop using the tools that you've, but again, there's more. I mean, because I worked in healthcare, and God, healthcare and education get the worst software written for them, because they're required to have software to do certain things, but nobody in healthcare or education has any coding experience. Nobody knows how to go, I need this and I need that and blah, blah, blah. So there's a whole cottage industry of selling them the software that will do what they need to do, and they don't know how to judge it. The people buying it just literally don't know how to judge it. They certainly don't know how to say, yeah, it does this, but it does it in a really time-consuming way. I need you to find a way to do it this way. But then the problem also becomes that there's enough difference place to place that there's a great challenge in writing the software in such a way that it can be nimble enough to be adapted to the users. I mean,
And also, or yeah, sorry.
I mean, as much as we sometimes complain about how expensive it is, and don't get me wrong, it is too expensive when they're putting out their record profits, and they're laying off programmers. There's a problem with the system as well, but there is legitimate amounts of work that go into maintaining any piece of software, specializing any piece of software. Sometimes when you're rewriting code, it's hard to get old code to work with it.
Yeah.
It sounds like a combination of neglect, some unavoidable stuff, which is probably pretty legitimate, legitimate byproduct of the field that they're working in.
Right.
And like Emily said, like a lot, I just have to believe that everybody's going to try to repackage stuff.
Well, I mean, I think whether you're talking software or comics or whatever, our system favors capital.
Oh yeah.
So
Can
the
I
people
say
with the
down with
money get to
capitalism on here?
Yeah,
Or-
go for it. Go for it. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, my only argument would be we don't have capitalism. This isn't capitalism.
What the heck is it
Capitalism,
then?
the government would be a stakeholder. Capitalism, unions are stakeholders. This is an
What?
oligarchy. We stopped being a
oligarchy, yeah.
capitalism a long time ago. I don't know that America has ever been a capitalism. If we were capitalism, the government wouldn't spend money on copyright. I mean, we're a system where the government doesn't do things for people, but does do things for corporations.
Yep.
That's not
that.
capitalism. That's not hands-off government. That's government putting its hand on the side of the scale that doesn't need it.
It's hand if we're lucky,
Right.
But
then
they ban the people who are on social welfare as being these leeches, while the corporations are the biggest leeches of all.
Right. Exactly.
Oh yeah.
But it also leads to a very real inefficiency in that the people who have the capital don't necessarily understand how the things they're paying for work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, they think they're the smartest because they have the money,
That's the corporate mentality. I
Right.
did.
And sometimes they actually earn the money because they are smart in one area, but that doesn't automatically make them smart in another area. And they completely discount the people who actually do the work. Somebody tells them, "Hey, what you're asking for can't be done," and they fire them, and they hire the person that says it can be done, even though that person's just saying it can be done. The
That's
person
madness.
isn't actually managing to do it.
Years ago, years ago, somebody contacted me about doing some kind of teaching a workshop for some corporate gig, and they interviewed me about it twice. And it was a lot of conflicting. Like one day they would tell me, you got to remember these people you're teaching, they know nothing. They are raw beginners. And then when they interviewed me and asked me how I would construct my lesson, I would say, I'd explain it for raw beginners, and they'd say, these people are experienced. And I'd be like, okay, that's. And then they came, and then I explained like what I was going to do. And they were like, okay, we don't want a lot of self-expression in this art workshop that you're teaching.
Oh
We
my
want
God.
people, yeah, we want people who are going to, like, they're explaining to me what reality is, and they're explaining to me what realism is and what representation is, I suppose.
Oh my
We
God.
don't want quote unquote people being creative and putting a lot of flourishes in. And I just said that, I know how to, if there's one thing I know how to talk about, it's the way that we communicate visual language and the way that we understand how to depict ideas into visual language. I'm like, that's what I do. So I said to them, well, I would say that no matter who they are, their personality is going to not be eradicated. It's going to, even if they're trying to do something that is vacant and like, you can recognize an illustrator's signature styles. So I think we don't have to actually stress getting into, almost felt like they were saying, we don't want a lot of this, we don't want a lot of that fruity self-expression bullshit. Like, we don't want that woo, like abstract nonsense you artists are into, or whatever
No,
they were
you need to
saying.
tell them how to make a line.
And
What did they
How do you
want?
keep it
I'm so
straight?
curious.
so that's what I'm leading up to. So they were like, so they tell me 5 different things. And while I'm telling them this, they just like, I'm rapping. I'm like, so no matter who you are, your voice is going to be a signature as your people, your family recognizes your handwriting. People are going to recognize things you're not even conscious of in your art. And they were like, oh, okay. And then they just kind of wrapped it up. And somebody told me later, who worked in the corporate world, they go, what you're describing is the corporate culture in a nutshell. We don't know what we want, but we still know better than you. And
Right.
and I've thought about that over and over again. You see examples of that everywhere in the in the corporate culture.
I
My my
can think
my
of clients for like
yeah.
illustration stuff that yes.
My
Yeah.
brother's a data scientist who's currently unemployed because the company that he worked for most recently finally realized, possibly even a little bit with his unintentional help, that they really don't need a data scientist. That
Oof,
he was
that sucks.
way overqualified for what they were asking him to do.
How is he living? How's he surviving?
I mean, he hasn't been unemployed for long, but right now he's on unemployment and taking interviews and whatnot. So
Right on.
Do either of
um,
you read Derek M. Ballard's comics on Instagram?
Oh, he teaches at
I don't
Saw,
spend
right?
enough time to do
Yeah, he
on
does, I think.
Instagram.
Yeah.
He used to work on like what was that show? Not Adventure Time, The Magic Crystal or Magic Goblet or you know what I'm talking about. It was like Duncan Trussell or something.
I can picture it. It's sci, but it looks like the Dark Crystal. It looks like fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like his comics because he's
Adventure
all
Time. He did some Adventure Time.
yeah. I don't know. I
Midnight
really like his
Gospel.
comics. I guess that doesn't really have anything to do with. It kind of
I-
does.
yeah, everything
Oh,
I
I
see
know
from
his
Derek,
nib work. That's where I know him.
Oh,
Did work on
everything I
the
see
R.I.P.
nib.
from
Nib.
Derek is amazing. So, hi, Derek.
That's actually what I'm looking forward to the most about CXC is that they're doing like a big party for the end of the nib with Matt
Oh yeah,
Murs and and other people.
Nice.
So you'll both be at CXC.
We will.
Oh yeah, I'm doing a
He's
panel with
actually doing
MS
stuff.
Harkness.
I'm just hanging out.
I'm gonna do
What's the theme of the panel?
comics retreats.
Cool.
Which again, it's like, am I qualified? Well, I did one. So I mean, I organized one, and I guess
Yeah, have you been on some?
yeah, I've been on one, and well, I guess two, including the one that I was organizing, and
So,
I
I
am
mean, that's
organizing
qualified.
another. Yeah, and I'm organizing another right now. So the one that I did was like, I was like, because I went to the MS Harkness Hocking Hills one, and it was like so much fun, and it inspired me to move to Chicago, because I'm like, dude, this whole community aspect of like being with other artists and like talking and stuff, I kind of like, Minneapolis is good, but if I can get even more of that in Chicago, I'm moving there. So, but what was I gonna say? Yeah, so I was like, okay, well, I can't do what MS did, but I can do a 3-day weekend at House on the Rock. So
Okay.
that's what I did. So I'm going to talk a lot about the financials of like, how do you make something like this work? So yeah.
I think there's a long-term plan that we hope, I did the art farm thing this summer.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, that looked so much fun.
And that place could be a great resource eventually. I mean, her house is beautiful. And I mean, it's in a wonderful part of the country, it's like the air smells good there. You can see the stars at night. Her house is like, has 100-year-old furniture in it. It would be, and Carol just lives and breathes comics. So I think that's one of Tom really laid down a lot of himself in it. I had a torn rotator cuff, so I still did some like one-armed work, but Tom was like helping her drag out a rusted what do you call it? A huge rusted ancient radiator from the basement. They both like just busted all kinds of ass. We were like digging out posts that were like buried in her yard that used to secure some kind of deck or something. I tore down a fence. So, but Tom is doing it I think to help Carol, and because she needs support, because she doesn't have a lot of help on the land, but also I think that the dream is for both of them to have it expanded and have it be a resource for artists.
Oh, that'd be so cool. Just like a comics farm.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Feel free to
like
bring that up at the panel.
oh, that would be, yeah, for sure. I almost want to ask, like, not that I'm on like a, messaging basis with like Tom Hart, but I want to ask him about this. Like, that sounds so cool. And I
Yeah.
grew up on a farm, so like maybe I can, tote some bales.
What kind of farm did you grow up on?
We did dairy cows and pigs, and then we switched to just pigs when my mom decided she didn't want to be a farm person anymore, and she got a job as a she bounced around from a couple of jobs, and then she finally landed at paraprofessional, which she's been doing for like 20 years, which is like yeah, so helping with special ed kids and helping special education, and so we moved. Cows are much more dairy, especially much more labor intensive than pigs, because you have to milk them twice a day. So like
You
I
don't
saw
milk
my
the
dad
pigs?
like at dinner, and that was about it. So
The artist Matthew Barney.
what did he do?
He was married to Bjork for a while. He did the
Oh
Cream.
that Matthew Barney. I was like, what comic artist is named after that artist? So
And he said in an interview that he grew up with his father was a farmer, and his mother was an abstract painter, and he said it's all in his artwork, because he grew up seeing how life functions up close, and he saw also how his mother abstracted reality up close, and he said those two things are very key to how he works, and linking those things together is like a key to his work.
oh, crazy. Yeah.
But I mean, that's what us artists do. It's kind of a multi-level thing, because that's both a great spin or a great what do you call it? A great way to brand himself, and a great kind of way to kind of like to use your own history, like, and to tie it into your work. That's what they teach you to do in art school, and it's completely authentic at the same time. There's something really inauthentic and something authentic about that both.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be like, oh, I know everything about milking cows. Because, like, to be quite honest, I was really bad at like being a farm kid. Like, I was like, let me feed the babies. So
I would have sucked. I hated mowing the lawn as a kid.
I burned the engine out on our lawnmower because I made it go up to the fastest one because I wanted to get it like done the fastest. But we had like, acres of lawn. So they were like, what happened to the lawnmower? And yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the back of your head, I mean, there's no reason to mow a lawn. I don't give a shit if a lawn it looks the same to me, whether it's shorn and, well maintained or not.
Well, I
So,
mean, I like to play baseball.
oh,
Well,
That lawn needs to be mowed.
yeah, yeah.
okay, we'll
And
make an
it makes
exception
more
for
sense
lawns to
than
play
shoveling
on.
snow. Shoveling snow is the only task that if you don't do it, will do itself.
That's true.
Yeah, definitely had snow too. Yeah.
Well, it kind of feels like we're wrapping up. Is there
We're
anything?
going all over the place now, which
Yeah.
is fun, but I'm also hitting
Yeah, I
Sorry
my
to
think,
talk about, pigs,
no.
but yeah.
oh no, I love it. I thought that was really cool. I mean, I didn't expect there to be like stories of milking cows in this interview.
This is
I
how we
like,
roll, Josh. This is totally how we roll on this podcast. Not even just when Emily's here. Um, you
uh,
know,
I love Emily, and anything she brings up is legit to me.
that's
Thank
good.
you. Back at you, dude.
So the new book is Unended. Thank you so much for giving me the early look. It's really good. I enjoyed it
Thanks.
quite a bit. Um, you can find Josh at joshbear.com, Bayer, not Bear. He doesn't even really look like a bear, not enough on top. Um, anything else you want to plug, Josh?
No, feel free to reach out to me if anybody has any questions. I'm on Instagram, and I think at joshmbear.com, and
And all the links are also at the joshbear.com.
yeah. There's a link tree there.
Yeah. There's a Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Are you on Blue Sky yet?
Yeah, I am. Do I have a Twitter on there?
You do have a Twitter on there.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, I'm sure it goes to a dead link. I haven't done Twitter. I wasn't doing Twitter before Elon Musk, and I unplugged during
Yeah, it says this count doesn't exist. So
yeah,
yeah, it does go to a dead link.
I have to adjust that, I guess. But
Actually, that's right. You found me on. Did you find me on Blue Sky or did you send me an email? I don't remember.
I don't remember either, but I am on Blue Sky. Emily, are you on it?
No, I have never participated in Twitter or Blue Sky, or
Okay.
I feel
I mean,
like I wouldn't know what to do.
if you change your mind, I have Blue Sky codes.
Word?
Blue
Um,
Sky is cool because it's not like it's funny. I was looking at the apps that are on my iPad, and every single one of them is this invasive force. I mean, Uber is evil, and TikTok is fucking evil, and Instagram is super evil. And I'm going down the list. I don't think there's one benign app that I have on my account. But Blue Sky, yeah, I know I have like 50 friends on there, and they're all people I've met in person for the most part. So it isn't like you're being barraged with like TikTok videos all the time or other toxic content like you get in a lot of social media. And Facebook these days, I showed my page to Hyena Hell, and she goes, "It looks like a junk drawer." And it does. It looks like a spam drawer.
well, I mean,
Oh
what Blue
man.
Sky definitely has going for it that Twitter had pre
Pre-Musk.
Elon. Yeah, pre Elon is it's pretty easy to regulate your feed to go,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see this, I do want to see that. Um the only thing that I liked better about Twitter than Blue Sky is that there were not only DMing capabilities, but it was you could only DM with either mutual follows or people who had deliberately turned their messaging on. So that was a way for me to go get over my social anxiety. Was I know that if you've either opened your messaging or you followed me, you're okay with me sending you a message. Because that's always my issue. Even when it's up on websites, I'm sitting there going, yeah, but is that the contact information for like publishers and agents, or is that the contact information for guy in his basement talking about comics?
Uh-huh.
I feel much better when I have that direct, yep, you're allowed to talk to me.
Yeah, I get it.
So, but with Blue Sky, the most interesting thing is going to be what happens when they open up, because right now it's still invite. So there's a lot more community oversight just in terms of who's handed out codes.
I guess that's true. I guess it's inevitable that they're going to change.
Well, but it seems like they're deliberately taking it slow, and they're trying to, they're introducing things like the not censoring, but self-labeling, this is risque, this is whatever, to try to, because again, I mean, pre-Musk, everybody was talking about Twitter being a hellhole, and I'm like, not if you're good at curating your feed.
Mhm.
Because what immediately struck me about, because I got into Twitter late, I got into Twitter with the podcast after it was supposedly a hellhole, and I'm like, well, no, because you can even block advertisers. You don't want to see this ad? Block.
Mhm.
And maybe you'll see another ad, but it'll take a while for the algorithm to come up with a new one. And then eventually you go, I don't mind the ads from HBO because I like to know what series is coming out this month.
Yeah.
And I got to the point where it's like all of my ads were Comixology, HBO, and like Netflix, because those were like the only ad people that I didn't automatically block.
You know what happened on Instagram? That's been the first thing I've been targeted with that I've liked, and for like ever, is they somehow started sending me links for tattooists who are like, it'll say sponsored content, and it'll be some tattooist. There hasn't been a single bad tattooist. There's some of them are very local. So
Cool.
I discovered tattooists that way. There was a woman who was touring from Australia who came in that I found through the Instagram. What happened? I saw like 7 different tattooists today, and I've been like, every time they send me recommended content or recommended stories, whatever, I always have to end up hitting, I do not want to see this, and ask me why. I hit the choice. It makes me uncomfortable. And it's true, because it's usually sex and violence. And I mean, I guess they're tracking me, and they realize that whenever I see a Waffle House fight or I see somebody twerking in a G-string, that I'll stop. But just because I look at a car wreck doesn't mean that I'm subscribing to car wrecks. But yeah, if I see a car wreck with somebody impaled on their steering wheel, sure, I will look.
I love it. I love it when the algorithm knows me so well that it sends me very specific ads for things that I bought last week.
Oh yeah, it's gross.
I'm like,
yeah,
I'm
or
like,
like when you're talking about something and then it appears, and it's like,
but I mean, like ridiculous. Like, I buy a lot of digital comics because I'm running out of space. You can see behind me. So I'll get like the Comixology ad saying you should buy this, and I'm like, I bought it on Comixology last week. You got a lag time going.
Yeah, and it seems like there's nothing we can do about it. Like, we've all gotten used to it somehow. Like, I remember the first time I was like, that's creepy.
I go back and forth on whether or not I care.
I was talking about like I was talking about Adidas, and all of a sudden I'm getting an ad for it. I was talking about a retro rubber bat, you know, Halloween thing, and then I'm targeted, and we just end up accepting it. It's really
Yeah,
creepy.
actually, my favorite along those lines is that I had a student who the first three letters of his last name were BRA,
Mhm.
and I had to do data on him on a regular basis that I'm certain it wasn't being sold by the data company. So Apple must have literally been tracking the keystrokes,
Yep.
right?
Not. I bet.
That it would self-populate once I did the three letters. So I would just put in the BRA, you know, click on his name and go on. On that device and that device only, like all of my banner ads became for bras.
I can think of worse. On my Instagram, it's very targeted. It's videos of black cats because I have 2 black cats. And I'm like, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with
I mean,
cats.
overall, I don't get as worked up as some people because, you know, once in a blue moon, it like you were talking with the tattoo artist, it will actually lead me to something that I'm like, yeah, no, I'm glad I know about this. And the rest of the time, it's like dealing with commercials on network TV, which I toned out even before I could then stream, you know. And do I love it? No, I just like it's part of reality. It was always going to be part of reality. Um, and I try to live a life where they're not necessarily actually going to be able to do anything terrible to me by knowing about me. You know,
Yeah.
not not trying to do anything illegal. I'm not trying to do anything that I'm not proud of. So,
There's a
which
Charles
doesn't
Man-
mean that there wouldn't be plenty of people who'd say, "Ah, you do this," and I just go, "Yeah, so."
there's a Charles Manson song called "Don't Do Anything Illegal." Just popped in my head when you said
Really?
that. Yeah, yeah, you know it. I mean, it's as good
Yeah.
as any of his other songs. You ever listen to his music,
I
Emma?
have because I
My
have a
son
couple friends
subjected me
who
to some.
uh I have a couple well, I have one friend who's like, "Yeah, I really like his music." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but there's the murders and all." So,
It's
Yeah,
not
I can be
that
pretty good about compartmentalizing. I mean, there is a band I listened to recently that really rocks, and then I noticed that a lot of their lyrics were pretty fucked up right wing themed,
oh no.
and I tried to kind of block it out, you know, and just be like, you know, I mean, I grew up, I listened to Sheer Terror, I listened to Fear, I listened to, you know, Johnny Ramone in the Ramones was right winger. But I mean, I think right wing by 80 standards, you're probably a left, you're probably a Democrat
Oh
by
yeah.
80 standards.
Oh yeah. I mean, right
So
wing by George W. Bush standards is a left. I mean, Liz
yeah.
Cheney is considered a leftist. That's all you need to
Right.
know.
That's all you got to know. So I listened to them and they were just on the wrong side of the culture war. I'm not going to name the band, but they were like, and if you ever heard anti-scene, they were like that kind of anti-scene, like red, like hillbilly rock and roll thing, like AC/DC mixed with punk and a little bit of hillbilly music. And I looked up their fucking social media presence, and they had they were reposting this guy who was talking about cucks, talking about how like all these all these leftists, all these Democrats are communists,
So
and
this is like the reverse Rage Against the Machine,
yeah,
where
absolutely.
Yeah, this is like
where somebody tweeted at Tom Morello, "I used to love your music, but I can't stand your politics, so I'm done with you." And Tom just responded with, "What machine do you think we were raging against?"
Yeah. Oh, but
yeah.
back to Manson. Probably the most interesting thing about Charles Manson's music is he has this unfinished song called "Clang Bang Bang," and it's about prison. And it's Black Flag took some of the lyrics from it for the song "Black Coffee." If you ever listen to it, they totally have an homage. I mean, they were really into Manson. They totally have an homage to that song in their song.
Hmm. Maybe today I'll listen to some Black Flag. That sounds nice.
Black Flag is nice to listen to.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, we should hit it. Thank you so much for the interview.
Absolutely, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank
we
you.
do
I'll
book
come back.
clubs and shit. So if you ever look at oh, they're talking. Actually, I should talk to you because you clearly know your comic strips, and we have a comic strip book club, and it's always interesting to have new voices in that one.
Thanks. Let me know
Yeah.
and I'll see you in person at Crossroads.
Oh, you're gonna be at Crossroads too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta pick up are you gonna have your book at Crossroads?
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out how many copies I can get. I'm looking forward to having 500 copies of it, but right now I have like very little, like 18 copies. So
Okay.
I'll have a certain amount, but not like an infinite supply.
Well, so let me take us out, and then we'll talk for a couple minutes off air because we're all at Crossroads. But we don't necessarily need the world to hear our discussion of Crossroads. So for Josh Bear, whose upcoming book Unended, sorry, is fantastic.
Thank you.
Coming out, I think officially next month, right?
Yeah, it'll be available. Like it's pre-order level now,
Now.
and it'll be shipping out everywhere in October.
Yep. Order from his website, joshbear.com, joshbear.storeenvy.com. For Emily Mehr, you can find her on Patreon and Instagram, Ejoy Comics.
Ejoy Mehr.
It
MEHR.
is Ejoy Mehr. It is Ejoy Mehr. Okay. Ejoy Mehr on Patreon and Instagram. Support her work. For 22 panels. We will see you after the next page.